My name is Jabari Bodrick. I work in the Leadership and Service Center here on campus. It's on the second floor of the Russell House, across from Einstein's Bagels. They're all the time, very open concept space. I've been here at the university since July of 2015. I came here from the University of Georgia, where I was getting my PhD in College Student Affairs Administration. I ended up writing my dissertation on institutionalizing service learning in student affairs, and that's initially what brought me here to the university, was to help grow our service learning offerings here. I actually done the first 4 chapters of my dissertation, wrote chapter 5 here, which was a terrible decision while working full-time, but I got it done, thankfully, within that same academic year. It took me 5 years, but I'm glad it's over, and I'm glad I have that degree. So this is what we're going over service learning today. I think we have 50 minutes, but before I get into the content, I would like to know who you all are, especially as someone who would like to see service learning grow. If you all could please introduce yourself, to say your name and whatever department you represent or office. Can we start with you, please?
I'm Zach Jenkins. I work in the Arnold School of Public Health, and I manage all of the master level internships for our public and our master public health students.
I'm Christopher Krause, and I'm a PhD student in the Department of Geography and teach primarily basic genetic type classes in our department.
My name is Scott Turner. I'm in the business school and the management department and teach classes for working professionals.
Mary Hahn, and I work with the CTE.
I'm Kibba Vermeyer. I'm from the South Carolina Honors College and also a PhD student in the English department. I recently took over the service learning coordinator position over there, so I'm here to learn a little more.
I'm Melanie. I'm a graduate student in creative writing in the English department, and I teach the 101, 102 English classes.
My name is Lori Pick, and I work in the College of Nursing, and I teach mental health nursing in the classroom, simulation lab, and the clinical environment.
I'm Ellen Blackman. I teach in the English department, primarily speech communication courses, both in person and online. I also teach for TRIO programs.
Hello everyone, my name is Amber Kaluka. I serve as Associate Director for the Center for Integrative and Experiential Learning. I also serve as the Director for Quality Enhancement.
Hi, I'm Farhood. I'm a PhD student and part of physical engineering here.
Casey Jabari. I'm in the School of Public Health, and I teach for health promotion, education, and review.
I'm Jeff Goff. I'm a student in the English department getting my master's.
All right, thank you all for that. I really appreciate it. I've been doing this presentation for a few years now, updated the branding and a few other things, and so look forward to getting into that. So this is an overview of what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the core principles, define service learning, talk about some of the approaches to the work, and then narrow it down to specifically what it looks like here, some of the barriers and some of the opportunities that we have. And then I'll walk through course construction. It's a lot of content, but we're going to try and get it done. All right, if you have questions throughout the presentation, I have a question side, obviously. But if you have a question throughout the presentation, please let me know. Okay? This is one of our programs we have. It's called CC. We bring 4th and 5th grade students from Title I schools on the campus, give them a campus tour, let them interact with students. So bring a little happiness in there. The kids love copy. All right, and so these are our 3 core capstone campus from our core principles here. So you have your reflection, you have reciprocity, and community voice. If your class does not have this, it is not a service learning course, according to me. You know what I mean? Not whatever authority I may have. It is not a service learning course. These are all extremely important for service learning. All right? And so with reflection, it's more, we try to impart upon students that it's more than just a summary, that we want you to critically reflect on what you're doing. And these are some of the things that I've done in the past when teaching service learning courses. I taught a few at the University of Georgia at the master's level within College Student Affairs Administration. And then I make my U101 students do service as well when I teach that class. They're not a huge fan of it, but they do it because they have to. And so these are some of the things that we do to infuse a reflection component into the course. All right. I think the small group discussions probably bring out the most in reflecting on the service and the content. I think though that's probably the strongest one here. Students don't like to write, they don't always like to read, they like to talk. So we get them in small groups and get them to talking. All right. And then we always tell our students that we follow the what, so what, now what methodology to reflecting. So what happened, why is that important, and what are we going to do moving forward? Let's look at it as a cycle and try to get a cycle diagram, couldn't find one, so we just wrote it like this. So we try and let them view reflection as a cycle, and it's not a one-time thing, but an ongoing thing, not only through the semester, but hopefully moving forward as they go into other classes where there may not be a structured reflection component. You can still ask yourself these questions to structure any reflection that you may do. And it could be either the written or verbal reflection. Reciprocity and community voice, a lot of people combine them, but I separate them because unfortunately higher education has a long history as a whole of not necessarily doing what's best with the community. A lot of buildings that you may see, not only in Columbia, but in other places, used to be very historic neighborhoods that are now gone. And so you have to really fully understand the history of the community that you wish to enter if you're doing service learning. Community voice is important because there are people who remember those stories and remember that history, and they would like you to respect that. And so going into a community and telling them what you want to do without ever soliciting community voice is detrimental not only to the community, but also to your students, and really pushes this ivory tower type mind state that the university knows everything and that we don't care about the community. So please solicit community service and make sure that any service that is done is mutually beneficial, so that you're meeting your learning outcomes and that the community is getting what it needs. Any questions so far about anything? All right. So how do you all define service learning? Anybody have a definition of service learning? There's lots of them out there. Anyone? They told me to make interactive, so that's a question. If you don't want to answer it, it's fine.
Well, I have a question / answer. I think about time on task as a component, and I just wanted to get your thoughts if there's a range here, or how would you define time on task?
Time on task, you mean like a service hour requirement, potentially?
Yeah, or like if you think about a percentage of a class, of a 3-credit class,
Mm-hmm.
how much is dedicated?
I think it depends on the course. Yeah, I'm going to get into that in the course construction, but I'll say that I think it varies a lot on the course and what you're teaching. I don't think I have a hard and fast rule. I have to see the syllabus first. Yeah.
Do you have a minimum?
No, I don't. I actually don't believe in our requirements, and so that makes me a bit of a crazy man, I guess. But I don't believe it. All right. Nobody has one? Oh.
So I think of service learning as, I know there are a number of different models, but of actually having students go out and engaging directly with the stakeholders out in a larger community, I would say. So where you're not just trying to do something for them, but learning from them about what their needs are at a greater scale than you would reading about them or studying them on the internet.
Okay, Jabari, we have some great comments. Cindy stated that she thinks being connected to the community is part of her definition of service learning. And Valerie also stated that she thinks service learning, giving back to the community, is great, maybe not something on campus, but out beyond the UofSC bubble. And then Christian said she never thought of taking into consideration the community voice, but it's certainly something she will think about in the future.
All right.
Very good.
Fantastic. So this is just a random, that's not really random, I'll pull it from my dissertation. So this is the definition of service learning that I pulled from my dissertation. This is one that I've seen quite a bit. And are these slides going to be made available to everyone?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, okay, that's cool. Well, we'll do that. This is the one that I've seen used the most. And so when we talk about service learning here, we'll talk about it as a course-based thing. We have in my current office, Leadership and Service Center, we offer, non-course-based service learning through alternative break programs. In the fall, winter, and spring, we travel to different places and their students reflect every day on their service. That's service learning too, but we're going to focus exclusively on course-based here in this workshop. We like to see service learning as extending the learning environment, similar to what you were saying when you define service learning, is that students learn not only in the classroom, but also viewing their community as educators and those who are in the community as educators. Because a lot of our students don't really leave like a 3-mile radius of our campus. Yes?
This is probably kind of a tricky question with lots of different answers, but how do you define community?
Mm-hmm.
I know in one of the comments is like talking about the community outside of campus, but I think there's also a campus community.
Right.
There's an immediate like Columbia community, but there's also the county, the state, the idea of being a global citizen. So
Right.
how do you define community? Or is it really as ambiguous as I think it is?
It is pretty ambiguous. I'll also say that this is going to focus on domestic service learning because we do have some international service learning classes through our study abroad office, and some people organize their own international service learning. So when I refer to that, I'm referring to anything outside that doesn't have a UofSC attachment to it is going to be considered the community. Right? So we're not necessarily talking about the county, but we could, but we're not here. Most of the community partners that we deal with have 5 or fewer people, are in desperate need of our students' assistance, and probably wouldn't be able to make it if it wasn't for our volunteers, to be very candid with you. We see nonprofits come and go, and that's not unheard of in the nonprofit world, to be honest. All right, so benefits, friend Ralph Wiggum here. So these are some of the benefits for faculty teaching service learning. We'll get into the barriers a little later, and I know that it can be tough, but I mean, research has shown that teaching service learning courses really does help increase the depth of understanding that students have of the actual content. As much as I love service learning, it may not fit into every course or even into every discipline, but I've seen it in almost every course in this one. I think that it's worth a shot, or at least considering, and we can get into some of those considerations once we get into the course development part of it. Again, we talked about this for the students already. I think the personal development is also important. Oftentimes, students are serving across difference. Typically, at least here at the University of South Carolina, most of our students who are in service learning courses, at least from the demographic stuff or the demographic labels, are white, middle-class women between 18 and 22. Typically, when we go into the community, that is not the communities in which they are serving. And so they are serving across a lot of difference, and a lot of people, I don't know if I can even say this, a lot of our students are from out of state, and so this is their first experience in South Carolina. Some of them maybe freshmen are really having, or come from small towns or even larger cities that are very monolithic, so this is their first time ever having to deal with people or interact with people on a regular basis who are different from them. And that can be a very powerful and life-changing experience if facilitated properly when you go into these communities. And so I think that that's one of the benefits of service learning that's hard to quantify, but is definitely something that's really important. And then, of course, to our community agencies, I mean, just access to university resources. I know we pretty much at a space crunch here. You know, we're trying to build new things, and so can't always bring the community here, but we can bring our expertise into the community and share what we know with our community partners. So we're going to talk about 2 approaches. There's lots of approaches to service learning, but the first one being the civic engagement approach, and that's primarily apolitical and nonpartisan. And what's interesting about this approach is that it is, and this is an opinion, put that out there, it is increasingly difficult to have an apolitical or nonpartisan stance on certain issues. I feel like almost everything in our current climate becomes politicized, and I'm not really sure, unfortunately, if that's even possible or even necessary, to be honest with you. But we have, all right, I hear you. And so we have the civic engagement approach. I know a lot of faculty would like to stay when they teach classes, they want it to be about the service. Like say, for example, food insecurity alleviation is something that the university is taking very seriously and that it hasn't in the past. But even that's been politicized in certain arenas where, you know, students believe, well, there are some people, elected officials who believe that maybe kids should have to work for their free lunch, or that, you know, donors shouldn't be able to pay students free lunch bill at their schools. And we end up having these conversations in service learning classes about, you know, are we, you know, demonizing poverty by doing that? And to some, that is a political stance. You know, it's not necessarily about making sure that everyone has their basic needs taken care of. And so if making sure people aren't hungry is a political thing, then pretty much everything is, right? I don't know. I mean, I don't know what your all stance is on that, but that's where the civic engagement approach really just talks about the issue in isolation of some of the other political issues that may be going on. All right. And this is just another definition. Any questions about, any thoughts on bringing that apolitical, nonpartisan perspective into a classroom? Is it possible in 2020, given your disciplinary differences? Anybody?
Do it every day.
You do?
I do anything I feel like I have to do.
Right.
Absolutely, it's not about that.
Right. How do your students receive that?
No, I have had no pushback about it, so I'm focused on patient health, right? So that's our focus, and yeah, we could go into some political divides if we wanted to, but I just keep it real and focused, and we know what we need to do. They're very interested in learning we're working with patients that have mental illnesses, and so that's some heavy stuff. So I have seen people be very touched and sensitive about the actual opportunity to engage people that are struggling like this, and it's a really very cool thing. But I haven't had people talking about the political implications or this party or that party, what their perspective is on that. It's more just how can we find, where are the services, how can we find them, how can we support the people who are injured.
All right. Okay. Any other thoughts? All right. So the social justice approach would be almost the exact opposite of that. Is when we actually take a look at things from a macro level and not just say, why is this the case? But why is this actually happening? You may also see this called critical service learning, and I'll bring that up in the next slide. And this is what I see a lot in certain people in the College of Education, social work, sociology, sometimes public health. I'll see this social justice approach where maybe not necessarily talking about necessarily working directly with patients, but talking about healthcare as a whole and healthcare disparities and much larger societal issues like this is a problem, but why is it a problem and what can we do about it? It opens up lots of conversations, and everyone, to be completely honest with you, doesn't know how to facilitate those. And so I wouldn't necessarily suggest you take this approach unless you're used to facilitating emotionally charged conversations, right? And that is a skill that is usually honed over time. I guess you can't get it unless you try it, but you have to know your students to really know whether or not this is an approach you can even take with them. I know some of the class sizes here are approaching over 50 and things, so that could really be. I've never taught a class that big, so I have no idea what that would look like if everybody started getting heated. But yes, this is the social justice approach to teaching. And then we also have our critical service learning, which again is very similar. They're almost the same, but I wanted Tanya Mitchell, I think she's still at the University of Minnesota. I'm pretty sure she coined this term, and she writes a lot of work on critical service learning. All right. So what is the monetary value of one community service hour? I gotta guess, do we have like a numeric value? Anybody? I mean, literally any number is fine. I mean, there is a right answer, but I mean,
Minimum wage?
What's minimum wage?
In this day? Yeah.
I have no idea. I honestly don't know what minimum wage is. What is it? Does anyone know what minimum wage is? $7.25. So
Higher or lower?
Huh?
Is it higher or lower?
Well, I have to get more guesses at $7.25.
It seems like it's just not one party too, so it would seem like some of the values going to the community and some of the values going to the learner contributor, and
There
so
we
you
go.
get a multiplier effect, I would imagine.
Sounds right to me. Yeah, so we'll be higher than $7.25. All right. How much is your specific time worth then? How about that? Not just saying societal time. Everybody in here makes more than $7.25, I think. So
Say $100 an hour.
$100 works for you? That's what your time is worth?
Well, I'm just, no.
Oh, okay.
Well, yeah.
It is?
Yeah.
Keep you on retainer?
I'm just responding to that. So I'm just throwing out a number, right? I'm thinking it might be worth $100 for 1 hour of community service if we look at the whole wraparound.
All right, anybody else? We're going from 7 to 100. 15. All right, there we go. It's like Price is Right. I'm trying to see what we're gonna get there. So it's 2543. Independent sector does this every year. So a lot of times you may wonder how the University of South Carolina and some of these other institutions are coming up with their economic impact on the state. You're like, what are they using to even get this? This is a made up number. It is kind of made up, but this is the, give or take, 2543 is very specific for a made up number. But that is what the universe uses and what we use when we calculate our economic impact on the city of Columbia.
So what does this trend look like over time? Is this going up or down?
It is continuing to go up, but incrementally. So I think last year it was like 24 something. It doesn't change much. I wasn't doing this work during the last recession, so I don't know what it looked like during that, but that would have been like the biggest. Hopefully it's not gonna be the other one, so I need to figure that out. But this is what we use right now for that number. That's me doing community service back when 30 pounds ago, before I had to be here when I was at UGA. But this is what it looked like for service learning here at the University of South Carolina last academic year. So we have our courses and our sections. And so I thought just to break that down. So we have 40 courses, but we have 80 sections. So that's 40 unique service learning classes. So South Carolina Honors College, SCHC, they have unique service learning courses, meaning that every SCHC class is a service learning course. We may have English 101 where a certain section is service learning, but the rest of them are not, right? And so we have 80 sections, but only 40 specific classes. That was how many students, the service hours that they did, the economic impact, again, $4 million. When nothing else speaks to people about why service learning is important, this number, I really don't like bringing numbers into this, like monetary value and putting a monetary value on service. But a lot of people will make a lot of key decisions and want to see money. So.
How does Carnegie evaluate that? Because we are a national Carnegie.
We are.
For service learning. So what value how do they assess that?
It's a part of the equation, but if you don't track that, it's not that. It won't keep you from getting that designation. They'd rather see the depth of the work rather than the amount of money.
So they're looking at more the courses, the integration in the community.
Right.
More holistic.
Mm-hmm.
They're looking at versus.
And growth over time is important too, which is what we'll need to be taken very seriously when we go up, put this application together, is what kind of growth have we made since I think 4 or 5 years ago when we initially got this designation. We've had it, our institution has had it every year that it's been in existence. And so it'll be important that hopefully President Caslin and his group will make community engagement similar to what President Bastides did as a focus of the new strategic plan. Because that was one of the reasons why service learning, and then I know, Amber, you all are going to talk about integrated and experiential learning are able to grow. USC Connect, what used to be USC Connect came from that. And that's because it was a focus of ours. And so hopefully it can continue. This,
Go ahead.
No, you good. I was going to say, this is just general volunteers, not necessarily unique volunteers. So over half of our students, we're sitting about 35,000 right now, is that right? 32? Undergrad enrollment. A little under half of our students are actively involved at least once in community service. So that's fantastic. You had a question?
Oh, I just wondered, so this would be a dedicated service learning course. I can also imagine there could be general courses that would have a service learning component to them. Do you have a sense of what that looks like? Or?
I don't. So, man, so there's a lot of answers to this particular question. So when I initially got here, it's hard to track service learning courses because we don't have a service learning course designation. And so most of the service learning classes that I've been able to identify has been through working with this office, talking to faculty senate presidents, back when Augie was faculty senate president, and just continuing to identify it that way. I would imagine that the number is significantly higher than this.
I'm just thinking about myself, it would be hard for me to maybe create a dedicated service learning course to see the requirements that the school has and those sorts of things, but
Right.
it would be easier for me to think about, well, can I take a component and sort of try to build in something, but not the full thing.
Yeah.
I'm just curious.
And we'll talk about that with the course construction as well. I think that's something that a lot of faculty have. And we had an astronomy professor who did that last semester. 2 semesters ago, excuse me. I'm losing track of time. All right. And then this is for the fall. This is at our MLK Day of Service. I guess they were in a Walmart or a Sam's parking lot, keeping the Midlands beautiful. They were doing some beautification. But this is how many we had in the fall, it's how many sections, and that's how many students were in the courses. Drop ad just ended, so I can check the numbers for the spring coming up pretty soon. All right, so there's going to be a whole presentation on this tomorrow, so I'm not going to go into this too in-depth. But if you're trying to market your class, at least the service learning component to students, graduation with leadership distinction is something that we encourage them to pursue. The community service pathway is the one, I guess, the most connected to service learning. And these are some of the requirements, but not all of them. And so that 6 hours, credit hours of approved coursework is typically a service learning course, right? And so that helps market.
Say that again, just to break that down, 3 experiences within the same course or 6 credit hours?
Well, this is just while being here at the university.
Okay.
Yeah, I can add a little bit. So, yes, Jabari's spot on. This is a great pathway for students interested in service learning. The 2 sites for the 300 hours, that does, it could be literally 280 at one and 20 at another. It just needs to add up to at least 300, and that's across their academic career here. The 3 experiences, we call those enhancement activities. It's this idea that one-time experiences that really complement the pathway. So that could be a faculty lecture on campus, that could be a service Saturday. It's a lot of different ways that students can frame that type of experience. The 6 credit hours, Jabari's right, we have a lot of service learning courses on the books for that pathway. Each pathway has their own dedicated coursework. I will note that we are a little concerned that the coursework is perceived as a barrier to students pursuing GLD because of the amount of courses we have listed. So one thing we have done is when we provide this update, students can now write in courses in their application that meet the spirit of the pathway, so to speak. So if a student thinks of a sociology class or a public health class that speaks to that pathway, they can write that in their application and that will be acceptable. And the rest is, if you've been to Discover UofSC, you probably know a lot about that. That's the public presentation, verbal articulation. And then our office works particularly with students on the e-portfolio component. We offer a 1 credit course that's highly successful in terms of completion rate, the e-portfolio, or they can also do a one-on-one advising through our office.
All right, fantastic. So what are some barriers from teaching a service learning class? What stopped you or maybe your colleagues from potentially, or stopped you initially, if anything, from teaching a service learning class? Anyone?
Getting let out of your regular cycle of all the other
Yes,
stuff
course release,
you have to
yes.
teach all the time.
Yes, course release is a...
Yes, I teach multiple classes at the same time, and also I teach a course where, if it's not designated in advance as a service learning course, I'm concerned about buy-in from students that would just show up on the first day and be like, this is a service learning section. Some of them may not have wanted to sign up for that, and I don't think that's fair to potential community partners to foist reluctant students on them that are trying to get a gen ed requirement done. That makes me nervous.
Me too.
Yeah.
Once I got resistance because there were concerns about liability and having our students at a particular site. We're doing certain things, and another was transportation. So trying to coordinate a group of people and getting them to a site and getting them back was a barrier once.
Was there anything about the particular site that was risky?
I didn't think so. It was working with a homeless population, but the issue came up about did we need to have the students get insurance and what risk and how we could protect them. I don't know. I don't think those were warranted, but
I got you.
it was a barrier.
I would also say creating questions that are articulated the right way it's not really a barrier, but it's really important, because if you're not creating those critical reflection questions in the appropriate way, you can do more harm. The student can do more harm to the student potentially than good if they're not seeing the full critical reflection of the situation.
I understand. You're doing the construction, making sure that you have those questions up front, ready to go.
Getting a committed community partner would seem to be very.
All right. Those are all good ones. To your insurance piece, the Department of Student Life, formerly the Department of Student Development, pays for a blanket insurance for all service learning classes. So just moving forward, if you want to talk about insurance, I can get the insurance people to send you out a certificate of insurance if you wanted to teach the class. In terms of community partners, the leadership and service, and we work with a lot of community partners. So if you just let us know what you need and when you need it, and as long as we have enough time, we could probably find a community partner. They're almost always looking for something, so we could probably get that. Can't help with the course release. I'm sorry, that is a monster. That is really hard to do. Some of our strongest service learning classes and longest standing service learning classes are taught in the Honors College or very small. I know the university, especially as we move into this is all getting recorded and stuff. I'm just saying crazy things. But as we move to this new budget model that you trying to graduate more students, which means more than likely is going to mean bigger classes. And so I'm not sure where service learning ends up landing in that, because typically our service learning classes are smaller, and it may become increasingly difficult to get a course release to teach a smaller course. If our new goal is to graduate people in 4 to 6 years, which it should be. I mean, we want to graduate people. I think that's extremely important. But one of the things that may not be able to be at the forefront anymore would be smaller courses that give you that really strong, impactful experience. It'll vary widely on that. So yeah, those are some of the real barriers. No one really mentioned funding, but funding is definitely a thing. I know in the past, Center for Teaching Excellence has provided funding, and hopefully that can start up again soon at some point in time in the near future. But there are grants out there for service learning, internal and external, I'm pretty sure. And so that's another piece there. And again, you're right, the critical reflection questions, if the students are left to their own devices about what their experiences are like and not able to give that structure, it can go off the rails pretty quickly. All right, and so when we're talking about course construction, the first two, if you've ever done a class, and you're probably doing these first two, mandatory or optional service, and this gets into what you were saying. And so what some instructors have done is they'll put into a syllabus and say, hey, maybe instead of this 4 or 5 page paper, we have a service learning experience that you can do and then write a reflection on it as opposed to doing a research paper. So everyone in the class is not doing a service learning experience, but some of the students are. And we've seen some success with that. That's definitely a thing. The number of service hours, again, I'm not a huge put a number on service. I think it depends on, I understand why, because you want to have consistency among the classes, so I get where that comes from. It's just that, I say, for example, I do a lot of work with the local elementary schools, and before the break, I was in there for maybe, 10 hours, and you see the level of food insecurity among the students. You see certain kids who barely have, clean clothes to wear to school. You see, because the way the university works is that if you bring them on campus, you have to have at least one chaperone per 10 students. It's like a best practice. But when you don't have when you have parents who are constantly working and can't make it on the campus, and teachers who are always teaching, the students can't come. And so then what do? We have all these fantastic opportunities, but we can't bring students there, and the students know that, and then they end up acting out. Anyway, that's 10 hours. I say all that in 10 hours, I didn't need a 60-hour semester experience to be able to see that, this is not good. And I can see what the impacts of poverty are on these students who may not have the coping mechanism or the life experience to be able to deal with these things, right? And so I don't believe in hours, but you want to have hours, that's fine. Students get credit for the learning and not the service. And so some students think, well, I did my 50 hours, why don't I have an A in this class? But it's not about the number. And as you see, removing the number, you don't have to worry about that. But yeah, it's about the learning. Students don't get credit for the service. Whether it's going to be inside or outside of the class time, I don't know if the university has a policy on this, so I'm not sure. And then direct or indirect service, where you're actually going out into the community, or maybe you're actually doing like a marketing campaign or doing some things on the back end. Yeah. You had a question, or you were just?
Oh, no, sorry.
Oh, okay, you're doing that. Okay, cool. So this is all pre-service things. Of course, identifying a community partner is also important. Transportation is important. Most of the time, the university is not able to provide that. My bus system is getting a little better, but in the city of Columbia's bus system, but it's not always on time. And so that can be a barrier at times as well. Especially if students want to Uber into your, I guess, service site isn't probably the most financially best decision, but it can happen. Any questions about pre-service things? Pre-service things? All right. So you select a community partner. It's always best to meet with them in person so that everybody can get an idea of what their responsibilities are throughout the semester. One of the worst things you can do is just say, all right, well, we're just going to do this and assume everything's going to go well. We have lots of memorandums of understanding. If you need a template, I can send you one about what everybody's going to have to do. It's fairly simple to do, and make sure that the students know that up front as well. Also, I think it's very important to do at least one class period dedicated to, or a portion of a class period dedicated to informing the students of the community that they're going in. This is really important. I've made the mistake of assuming students know something that they definitely don't know, and so about the community that they're in, because they may walk through it every day. So I'm like, well, maybe you do know the history of like the Waverly neighborhood or 5 Points because you're there all the time, right? No, they don't. They don't know anything about it.
You do multiple partners instead of one. You mentioned a partner or agency. It's okay to have multiple partners?
I think so. And what some instructors, professors elect to do is to bring the community partner into the class to explain what they're about. It's probably the easiest thing if they have the time to do so, and they usually make time, pay for their parking or whatever, and they'll make time to do it for you. So that's really important, and that's what that pre-service orientation is. And then if you have the time to make site visits, not necessarily even while the students are there, just to make sure that everything is going the way that it wants to. What you would hate to happen is that the students are there and some things aren't necessarily going the best, and you don't know that until the end of the semester. The only time I've ever had something happen was when it was in Lexington, my first semester here, terrible time for something to happen my first semester here when I didn't know anything. And then we had a community partner, a student, raised $1,000 for a community partner that was dealing with human trafficking. And the woman who's over the nonprofit just stole the money, right? Just stole it. And she didn't know who to tell, and then the instructor didn't have the pre-service orientation, so she didn't know if she should tell the instructor because she knew the instructor and the person at the nonprofit were friends. Eventually it got out and later went to jail. But like it was quite a process. And I was brought in on the tail end of it. Like I found out like the next semester that any of this happened. And I was in that class like 2 or 3 times. So that's what happens when there isn't that level of communication and everyone doesn't understand what's going on. All right, so it's super important that you do that level of education and have a good relationship. You gotta be best friends, but a good relationship with the person who's at the site. All right. And then post-service, it really all depends. I like to look at macro level things, and so I'll talk about what we learned that semester and what this means moving forward. I think a lot of our students live, and I guess it's partially on us, live their life semester by semester, like whatever's important to them is that semester, and then they dump it all out and put new things in. And so we'd like for them to think about things, be lifelong learners, and think about, hey, if you're passionate about this, hopefully you'll live a long and fruitful life. You can continue to be a part of this and it doesn't have to be a part of a class. And usually with some of them that resonates. And then they'll join a student organization or they'll be a part of a nonprofit, if not here in Columbia, but wherever they move, And then once they learn what they learn in that service learning class, they'll see it in other places. But once you're exposed to things, it's hard to not see it anymore, And then we have, this is essentially what I just said in a picture. And with that, I'll just open up the floor for questions from anyone about service learning as a whole or about what we have going on here at the University of South Carolina.
I have kind of a related question, both related to this idea of direct versus indirect service and also kind of piggybacking off an example you gave. What role do you think philanthropy or fundraising plays in service learning? Is it service learning or is it only adjacent to it?
So, there's no right answer to this.
Okay.
When we calculate our service learning hours for the semester, we don't count philanthropy. A lot of our fraternities and sororities raise a lot of money, and we really appreciate it, but we don't count that as service.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. Nothing says you can't, though. I'm just telling you what we do.
Do you ever have to navigate situations where community partners may not have, not that they don't have the best interest of the community at heart, but maybe they're a little bit disconnected from that community? How do you navigate situations like that to make sure the community in need actually is getting what they need out of it?
I haven't seen it while I've been here in Columbia. Most of the nonprofits that I work with, and I guess elected state-run entities, the people there, surprisingly, almost all of them are from Columbia. I feel like either they don't leave or they come here and just come back. I don't know what's going on with that, but a lot of them are from Columbia and they understand the issues that are impacting this community. Thankfully, I haven't run into that. I have run into the reverse, where I've had students or instructors who are more interested in their grade and in their research than in what the communities need. And that can be a very difficult conversation. Easier with the students because their power differential, a little different than with faculty, especially when they have tenure. I can't tell them anything. But it doesn't happen very often, though. You have?
Yeah, so how do you feel or approach classes that want to address problems that are here on campus? So for example, Joe Jones taught his sustainability food course this past semester, and they worked with the Gamecock Pantry. Like, is that a viable partnership, like a community partnership, or are we really wanting to push our instructors to kind of go off campus and really engage with the community around the university?
I think that it is. I mean, I'm biased because I oversee the Gamecock Pantry along with my staff. But going to what you said, there is an internal campus community as well, and so food insecurity is very prevalent on our campus. And we have two gardens. We have Green Quad Office of Sustainability has a garden. There's a garden behind Preston, but we don't get as many fresh fruits and vegetables from those. And so when Joe Jones's class brings their produce over, it really does help our students who otherwise will be dealing with non-perishables throughout the entire semester. And so I think that it's vital. Any other questions? This is my contact information, my direct line, email address. If you want to follow us, yes.
On your last slide, one of the points on there was like developing ownership. And I'm wondering if that would be something that you as the instructor developing, or if you're also trying to get your students to have developed some kind of ownership in the stake that they have in the community as well? So coming from a student affairs background, we always want the student to come up with that. What I've noticed with a lot of my students is that they are very dualistic in their thinking. They'll do exactly what I tell them all the time because they want the grade. But if I tell them I want you to develop it yourself, I give them more ownership of it. So I would like the student to come up with it, if at all possible. How do you do that if you as the instructor have already picked the agency you're going to work with, the sites you're going to go, that kind of thing? How do you make the students have ownership in a service living opportunity that you basically have kind of prescribed for them?
Right, I can see that. Yeah, I can see where that's coming from. When I teach, well, it also depends on how your course description is written. So then when they go into the class, I like to say, and this course includes a service experience in XYZ. Maybe it'd be one community partner or two. So at least they have an idea of the classes they're coming into. Going to what you said, I personally would not want a student to enroll in a service learning class if they didn't know service was going to be a part of the course. I think there's a lot of terrible things potentially to the community. So I think it's just very important to be upfront about what type of service they'll be conducting in the community. And then hopefully they can develop that. And if for whatever reason they don't feel that, just to have a backup plan. Like I usually go in with 2 or 3 community partners, and so they don't necessarily have to come up with community partners for themselves. It can just be challenging if you allow them to pick their own, because then you don't have a relationship with the community partner that they're dealing with, and we only have 16 weeks. And so by the time they identify one, it may be 8th week in the semester, and then we're in a bad place. Just logistically, we got here and then we'll go. Yeah.
We have a question from the online community. How do you navigate non-traditional students or students with disabilities who may not have the actual time/ability to complete a service learning activity.
And so that's where we get into the indirect service, something that they can do in their home or wherever they are. It may not be, it can be challenging, but we'll have to make it happen. That's when the indirect service comes in and we figure something out. Everything doesn't have to be on site. Yeah.
I was gonna say the idea of having the students take ownership and responsibility for identifying a community partner makes sense to me, especially in a journalistic environment, where they have to research the issue, identify a partner, reach out to that partner, engage with that partner. But you mentioned that 8 weeks in is too late. Is it only too late if you have an 800-hour service learning component?
You're right.
But not too late if it's a 20-hour service component?
Yes.
So it's really a matter of if you only have so many hours associated with that, you could probably get away with that sort of model.
And I would agree with that. I was speaking from the perspective of someone who starts week 2 there, we're getting into it. I'm going to what you were saying, like the partial, like we have 20 hours, 10 hours, and it can be much later in the semester. That's a lot more practical. That's all I have, everybody. Thank you.